My dad convinced me to sign over my house to him for tax purposes. Now he won't give it back, and I'm taking legal action. I'm 32, divorced, and still trying to put my life back together. The last few years have been nothing short of a roller coaster. Heartbreak, financial strain, and a lot of feeling like I'd never get my footing again. But my family, they've always been there, or at least I thought they were. 3 years ago, I managed to buy my first home, a modest place, nothing fancy, but it was all mine, a little sanctuary where I could breathe, where I could start over. I'd sunk every last bit of my savings into it, even stretched myself a little thin, but it felt worth it. After my divorce, that house became more than just 4 walls and a roof. It was my stability. The one place I knew was mine, where I could just be. And then my dad came along with his big solution to help me keep it. It started out so casually. Hey, son, let's grab dinner. Been a while since we had a real catch-up. That was Dad's way. He could make anything sound harmless. So I showed up at his house, and he had a nice spread of food out, a couple of beers on the counter. I figured he was just being Dad, trying to cheer me up, knowing how tough things had been since the divorce. We're sitting there, halfway through a beer, and he leans forward, like he's about to share a secret. So, listen, I've been talking with my accountant, and there might be a way to take some of that financial weight off your shoulders. I should have known better right then and there. But, honestly, I was exhausted. Just done with all of it, the lawyer fees, the bills, the mortgage. So, when he said he wanted to help, I listened. It's pretty simple, he explained, like he was laying out the most logical plan in the world. If you sign the house over to me, I can claim it on my taxes. I've got plenty of deductions, but with your house in my name, we might be able to offset some of your costs. All just for tax purposes. He saw me hesitate, so he added, of course, you'll still live there, just like normal. And I'll put in a clause so you can take the house back whenever you want. Just a formality for the paperwork. I knew I should have thought it through, asked more questions, but he's my dad. My whole life, he'd always been the guy who seemed to know how to handle money, who talked about investments and playing the system smart. And right then, I wanted to believe he was on my side, that he really wanted to help. So I did it. I signed over the deed, trusting him, trusting the clause in the contract that my lawyer insisted would protect me, so I could take back the house whenever I needed. I felt like it was a weird arrangement, but in my gut, I told myself, it's Dad. He wouldn't screw me over. For a few months, things were okay. Dad would call every now and then, asking if I was handling things all right, if I needed anything. But pretty soon, he started showing up unannounced, like he owned the place. He'd make little comments about the yard, the condition of the fence. You really ought to think about putting up a new one, he'd say, his tone all serious. Then one day, he showed up with a contractor in tow, walking around the property, pointing things out. Just getting some quotes, he said casually, as if that was a normal thing to do. When I reminded him that it was still my home, he just gave me a funny look and said, well, technically it's under my name now, remember? Just trying to look out for my investment. It was unsettling, but I tried not to think too much of it. Maybe he was just being his usual, overbearing self. But I had no idea how far it would go. One day, out of the blue, he called and asked me to meet him. Said he had business to discuss. I figured he'd gotten another idea for a tax scheme or some nonsense, so I met him, not expecting much. He was waiting for me, clipboard in hand, looking every bit the serious businessman. Listen, he said, like he was about to lay down some big revelation. I've been crunching the numbers. With inflation and the costs of upkeep, I'm going to need you to start paying rent. I just stared at him. What? Rent? Market rate? He clarified, like he was doing me a favor. I've got bills too, you know. And technically, you're living in a property I own now. You're kidding me, right? Dad, I pay the utilities, the maintenance, everything, but he just shrugged. It's just business, son. You know that. I could feel my heart pounding. We never agreed on this. You said you wanted to help. Now you're acting like I'm some tenant. Well, technically you are. Look, if you can't manage it, maybe it's time to find something smaller. He actually had the nerve to suggest I downsize from the house I'd bought with my own money. I didn't know what to do. It felt like every time I turned around, he was finding new ways to push me out. One day, I came home to find an eviction notice taped to the door. My own father was trying to kick me out of my house. I called him furious, demanding an explanation. "This has gone too far, Dad. You promised I'd be able to take the house back when I wanted." He just chuckled this cold, dismissive laugh. "You misunderstood. The house is legally mine, and if you can't pay, that's not my problem." I felt like I was going to explode. I knew I'd been naive, but I couldn't believe he'd actually go this far. Desperate, I got in touch with my lawyer. He confirmed that the reclamation clause was indeed legally binding, but warned me that enforcing it would be a nightmare. We'd be tied up in court, and my dad would almost certainly fight me every step of the way. And he did. His lawyer started sending threatening letters, claiming that I had no real stake in the property anymore, and that any attempt to reclaim it would result in damages to him. They were trying to intimidate me, to make me give up without a fight. But I wasn't going to just walk away. This was my home. A month later, we had our first mediation meeting. Dad sat across from me, not an ounce of remorse in his eyes. "If you just paid rent, we wouldn't be here," he said, like it was all my fault. I glared back at him, fists clenched under the table. "Rent? You're the one who talked me into this whole setup in the first place. Don't act like this was my idea." He shrugged, feigning innocence. "If you can't handle the responsibility, then maybe this is for the best." "Responsibility? You manipulated me into signing over my house, and now you're trying to make it sound like I'm the problem." My voice was shaking with anger, but he just smiled, his lawyer sitting there, nodding like this was all perfectly reasonable. They were ready to drag this out, to make me as miserable as possible, until I caved. By the time we actually made it to court, months had passed. I'd lost count of the number of family members who'd pulled me aside, asking me if I really had to put Dad through all this. They'd bought his story hook, line, and sinker, that he was just trying to help me, that I was taking advantage of him. The betrayal ran so deep, I barely recognized half my family anymore. But I'd collected every shred of proof. Emails, texts, the original agreement with the reclamation clause. I was prepared to lay it all out in court. On the day of the hearing, my dad looked almost bored. He sat there, arms crossed, watching me like I was some ungrateful kid throwing a tantrum. His lawyer went on about how Mr. Dad had only tried to do what was best for his son, and this is the thanks he gets. When it was my turn to speak, I let it all out. The months of manipulation, the threats, the eviction notices. I showed the judge the clause Dad had signed, the one that clearly stated I had the right to reclaim the house anytime I wanted. Dad's lawyer tried to spin it, but by the end, there was no denying the truth. The judge ruled in my favor. My dad was ordered to transfer the title back to me, and he left the courtroom without a word. But even as I walked out, feeling like I'd finally won, there was this ache in my chest, like I'd lost something I'd never get back. Things didn't just go back to normal. Half my family still thinks I did Dad dirty, that I took advantage of his generosity. Family gatherings are a nightmare now, with my dad throwing out little digs, making passive-aggressive comments about how some people don't know the meaning of family loyalty. My mother gives me these pleading looks, like she's hoping I'll just apologize and make things right. But there's nothing left to make right. He crossed a line I can't pretend away. Christmas rolled around, and as much as I dreaded it, I showed up for dinner. I thought maybe things would be civil, that he'd keep things light for Mom's sake. But it didn't take long for him to start. As soon as I walked in, he gave me this icy nod. "Glad you could make it," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Not too busy with your big plans to see your family?" I ignored him, trying to focus on catching up with my brother and cousins, but every time I turned around, there he was hovering, making little comments about responsibility, hard work, respect, everything he felt entitled to preach about. Finally, I'd had enough. During dinner, he started going on again about family obligations, hinting that some people don't know the value of sacrifice. I put down my fork, looking him dead in the eye. Funny you should talk about sacrifice, Dad. Given that you tried to take my home from me. The room went dead silent. My brother shifted uncomfortably, and my mom looked like she wanted to disappear. But Dad didn't miss a beat. He set his fork down, giving me this self-righteous look. I was just trying to help, he said, voice calm but laced with contempt. Maybe if you'd been a little more grateful, things wouldn't have gotten to this point. Grateful, I shot back, my voice rising. You manipulated me into signing away my house, then tried to charge me rent, and when I stood up for myself, you tried to kick me out. That's not help, Dad. That's control. He shook his head, putting on that exasperated look he always used to use when I was a kid, like I was being irrational, difficult. You always twist things around, make yourself the victim. I offered you a way out, a way to keep the house without all the pressure. But no, that wasn't good enough for you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like he'd completely rewritten history in his mind, casting himself as the hero and me as the ungrateful villain. Do you even hear yourself? I said, voice barely above a whisper. This isn't about me not appreciating you. This is about you needing control, needing to own everything, even your own son's life. He laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that made my skin crawl. Maybe you need to grow up and stop blaming me for your problems. I pushed my chair back, standing up. You know what, Dad? I have grown up. That's why I'm not letting you walk all over me anymore. You can play the victim, spin your version of the story to whoever will listen, but I'm done letting you control my life. I looked around the table, seeing the discomfort on my family's faces, the way my mom was wringing her hands, eyes darting between us. But I wasn't going to play nice just to keep the peace. Not this time. Without another word, I walked out, leaving the tension and the judgment and the weight of all those years behind me. In the months that followed, I started putting my life back together. My house, my sanctuary, finally felt like mine again. I repainted, redecorated, made it into the home I'd always wanted, but had been too afraid to make it before. Every little change, every piece of furniture, felt like a reclaiming of something I'd lost long ago, my independence, my self-worth. I kept my distance from family gatherings not because I didn't care, but because I needed the space to breathe, to heal. The holidays were different that year, quieter, but somehow more peaceful. Family, loyalty, respect. Those were words my dad had thrown around so much, but they never meant what he thought they did. Real loyalty isn't about control. Real respect isn't about ownership. And sometimes, the only way to find peace is to walk away from the people who refuse to see you as anything but a pawn in their game. Looking back, I realize I've gained more than just my house. I've gained my freedom, and no matter what else I might have lost, that's something I'll hold on to, something no one can ever take from me again.